This is a story called The Little Monsters, Chapter 54. The kids sneak up on Mrs. Applejack's brother and steal his clothes. It's a school's playtime and all the kids are outside playing in the school playground when Creeper sees Mrs. Applejack kissing a man. When she realised it wasn't Mr. Applejack, she told the rest of the gang. Just as she did so, the school bell went for them to line up and go inside. That same day, at lunchtime, Grumpy came out of the dinner hall first. As he did so, he saw Mrs. Applejack kissing a man. He told the others and they decided to keep an eye on them. The next day, as they arrived at school, Kicker saw Mrs. Applejack getting out of a man's car and kissing him as she did so. She could see that it wasn't Mr. Applejack. She told the others what she'd seen and they decided to continue keeping an eye on them. That same day at playtime the kids didn't see the man, so they just concentrated on playing. Again at lunchtime they didn't see the man. However, a few days later the kids saw Mrs. Applejack getting out of the man's car and kissing him again outside the school gates. They stood back where they wouldn't be seen and watched them. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, but they decided to continue keeping an eye on them. Later that day, at lunchtime, the kids saw Mrs. Applejack getting out of the man's car and kissing him again. They stood back and watched them, and again they couldn't believe what they were seeing. They decided not to do or say anything, but to just continue watching them. Over the next couple of days, the kids continued to watch them. Then one day, the man left his car parked outside the school gate after he dropped Mrs. Applejack off. The kids decided to sneak off the school premises and follow the man. They followed him to a lake and he went skinny dipping, so they took his clothes and threw them in the lake. Then they ran off giggling and went back to school. When the man saw his clothes floating in the lake, he didn't know what to do. He quickly gathered them up and he picked up a few branches and used them to cover up his goolies and his bum. The kids saw him sneaking back to his car, covering his goolies and his bum with branches, and they laughed hysterically. The next day the man left his car parked outside the school again, so the kids followed him again. He went skinny dipping in the lake again, and again they threw his clothes in and ran back to school, laughing their heads off. The man gathered up his clothes and got out of the lake. As he did so, a woman saw him and she couldn't help but laugh. He had to cover his goolies and his bum with branches again, and the woman was beside herself with laughter. When her husband joined her after getting their dog back on the lead, he too howled with laughter when he saw the man. A couple of days later, the kids saw Mrs. Applejack and the man walking away from school again. They followed them and they went to the local cafe as it was raining. When they went back to school, the kids put pins in the man's car tyres and caused all four of them to deflate. Of course, no one knew it was them as they did it secretly. And as soon as they'd finished, they went back to school. The next day, Mrs. Applejack was seen by the kids getting out of the man's car and kissing him again. This time the man was in a different car and he parked it not far from the school, and then started walking to wherever he was going. The kids followed him and he only went to the sandwich shop to buy a sandwich. Whilst he was there, the kids went to his car and stuck pins in the tyres again. However, the man decided to sit on a bench to eat his sandwich, and then he got up and started walking again. Again the kids followed him and he went skinny dipping again. The kids threw the clothes in the lake again, but this time they threw them where he couldn't get to them. When he saw his clothes floating away, he tried to get to them, but they were too far away. Of course, he had no choice but to grab some branches to cover his goalies and his bum, much to the kids' amusement. Thankfully, he managed to get to his car without being seen, and when he got there, he had to drive home with 4 flat tyres. The next day, the man dropped Mrs. Applejack off at the school in a hired car, and the kids saw them kissing again. They waited until the man left his car again, and then yet again they popped his tyres. However, this time the man almost saw them, but thankfully they managed to get away. They did hear him swearing and cursing as they ran off, which they thought was funny. The day after that, the man dropped Mrs. Applejack off in his original car, but this time he drove straight off. That day at lunchtime, the man came to meet Mrs. Applejack at the school gates, and they walked off together, so the kids followed them. They only went to the cafe near the school again, but the kids stood back and watched them. When they went back to the school, the kids saw them kissing again. This time the kids didn't have time to do anything, because the school bell went for them to go back inside. The following day there was no sign of the man, but the kids were still keeping an eye on him. However, no one saw him for 3 days, but when he did show up again, the kids watched his every move. That day when he dropped Mrs. Applejack off, the kids saw them kissing again. That day at lunchtime, Mrs. Applejack and the man walked off together, so the kids followed them again. This time they went to a different cafe. When they left to go back to school, the kids quickly ran back and popped the man's tyres. Just as they did so, Mrs. Applejack and the man came around the corner, so they hid down the side of a row of cars. Then they sneaked back to the school, laughing their heads off. The next day at lunchtime, the man met Mrs. Applejack at the school gates again. When they walked away, the kids followed them again. This time they both went swimming, so the kids threw the man's clothes in the water again, and then they went back and popped his car tyres. A couple of days later it was lunchtime again, and when the kids saw the man and Mrs. Applejack kissing again, they watched them, and when the man left alone, they followed him. He went to the lake skinny dipping again, so the kids took his clothes and threw them in the water again. Once again, the man had to get out of the water and cover his goalies and his bum with some branches. Just at that moment, Mrs. Applejack showed up, and when she saw the man, she couldn't help but laugh. Then she spotted the kids and she told them to stay where they were. In between giggles, she asked the kids, "Are you guys responsible for this?" "Yes, miss," answered the kids. "Why would you do this?" asked Mrs. Applejack. "We saw you kissing loads of times, miss," said Kicker. "We kissed each other on the cheek. He's my brother," said Mrs. Applejack. "Oh, we're sorry, miss. We thought he was your boyfriend," said Creeper. The kids apologised to the man, but they couldn't stop laughing, and neither could Mrs. Applejack and her brother. Mrs. Applejack didn't want her brother to have to face more embarrassment, so she didn't tell anyone about what the kids had done. End of chapter 54. Thank you for watching, guys.